Hello, nerds, nerds for humanity. We have one of our favorite formats, which is a panel discussion today. And, a lot of us have been engaging in all kinds of fun debates and discussions on Twitter and other social media. But this is an actual, like, live human to human conversation. And sometimes you get like a different vibe with those kinds of formats. So I think we're going to start it off with a little bit of a round of introductions, and we can start with Jeremy and then kind of go clockwise. Just who are you? Where are you calling from? And anything else you want to share about yourself, and then we'll dive into after who you're supporting and why. But why don't we just start with who you are and where you're from?
Yeah, my name is Jeremy. I am in St. Louis, Missouri. I'm here to represent Trump for the 2024 ticket. I'm not a strong Trump supporter, but I think I can still man the case for him. And, really, I guess because nobody else kind of showed up, I'll try to also steel man the case for Chase Oliver in the Libertarian ticket. And I think this will be a fun discussion.
Yeah, that'll be great. And Jeremy, you've been in our live streams in the past, like in the chat, I believe, right? I think I recognize your name.
Yeah, long time channel member, old member of the Yang Gang. Yeah, so
I love it. I love it. Hey, it's good to see you. It is interesting how the Yang Gang has sort of splintered into our maybe original positions, but we can talk more about that later. Welcome to the show, Jeremy. Drew, let's go to you, sir.
Hi, how's it going? I'm Andy Solomon. I'm from New Jersey originally. I joined the military. I'm a West Pointer. I'm now in the military. Just as a disclosure, my views don't represent the military. I'm just here to talk about Trump. I was a former Yang Gang supporter, and that's what got me into politics. And I think really that's the reason why I support Trump is mostly because of the media. I would say that's my number one issue.
Got you. What were you? I was born in northern New Jersey. What part of New Jersey were you from?
I lived in Union, New Jersey for a little bit. I also lived in Marlboro, New Jersey for a little bit.
Okay, very cool. Good to see you. All right, Zeus.
Hey, how's it going? My name is Jesus Alvarado. I was born in Northern California, and I am a hardcore Trump supporter. And I support him because I don't support the political establishment. I don't support the, as I refer to, the global homo regime, and that's very simple.
All right. Well, it's good to see you again, Zeus. And we'll finish up with Philip.
Hi, I'm Philip. I'm from New York, and I'm a law student. So part of the reason why I'm supporting Kamala Harris, and this is the easiest vote I'll ever cast, is because she stands for the rule of law, and she's not a convicted felon. So I'm excited to talk all that stuff out today too.
Oh, wait a minute! We got a last minute guest. We have a libertarian supporter. So Jeremy, you can go for Steelman both, but yeah, why don't we have our libertarian supporter introduce himself? Who are you? Where are you calling from?
Yes, sir. My name is Nick. I am a father of two. Live in North Carolina, Raleigh, North Carolina. I'm also originally from northern New Jersey. Originally from Parsippany. I don't know if that.
Yeah.
If that's anywhere near where you're
from. I
from.
grew up in Bergen County.
Right on. So Morris County for me.
Yeah.
And I think that Chase Oliver, somebody that if people heard his positions and actually saw him in the media, they would probably gravitate towards his message just because it gives people the most freedom in their life to make the decisions for themselves and their family.
Right on. Well, welcome to the show, and it's good to get some New Jersey representation. Did you say your name was Nick? What's your first name?
Nick, N-I-C-K.
Nick. Okay, great. So I'm Tom. I am calling from Northern California, from Zeus's home region. As I mentioned, I grew up on the East Coast, and I am a Harris supporter, but I wasn't always a huge Democratic Party loyalist. I was a a volunteer and briefly a staff campaign staff member of Congressman Dean Phillips when he was challenging Joe Biden for the nomination. So, and then like many of you, was in the Yang Gang back in the day as well. Okay, so why don't we start with we'll go in the same order, but then I'll kind of reverse the order later on. We'll start with Jeremy and then go around. Like, let's talk about how did you decide to support your candidate? And if you had to think about like maybe 2 key factors that did it for you, and I know we touched on some of those in the intros, but we can dig a little deeper now. Like, Jeremy, why are you, it sounds like you're leaning Trump. Like, what was the driving factor for you versus alternatives that you could consider?
Hey, there we go. All right, sorry about that, guys. I think the coalition that Trump is building this cycle is really, really interesting, and it's unprecedented in modern politics. Well, kind of similar to you, Tom. I was a supporter of Dean Phillips until the Democratic Party rigged it against him. I jumped over to the RFK side, supported him through it. Obviously, things didn't work out with RFK. RFK backs Trump. Tulsi gets on the Trump team. So it seems like there's a strange coalition of former Democrats that seem to be doing their best to reform the Republican Party into something completely new, some completely different. And I think it might be worthwhile to figure out where this goes. So you think, but Trump himself was a Democrat like not that long ago too. He was a supporter of Hillary Clinton, a Hillary Clinton donor. So there is a massive realignment that's occurring right now, and I think it might be worth seeing where this leads.
Yeah, you've been on a journey going from Phillips to Kennedy to Trump. I mean, I definitely sense a bit of a kind of not fan of the establishment kind of vibe there. Like, is there? It's from a policy point of view, like Phillips and Trump aren't that close.
Right. No, I had massive problems with Biden as a candidate. Well, even going back to 2020, Biden was too old then. And so when he got the nomination, when he won, it was definitely concerning. And at least Dean Phillips, for any problem that I had as far as policy wise, he at least had the courage to step up and say, guys, like, this is not right. We have a huge problem that we need to correct. And I support his bravery. So. So I'll play ball with anybody who's willing to do that. So
Gotcha.
Yeah, that's.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing, Jeremy.
Also, this is my son. This is my son, Jonathan. He says hi.
Hey, Jonathan. Yeah, I might mute you later, Jeremy, if Jonathan chimes in a little bit. But so just remember to unmute yourself like you did, if that happens.
All right.
All right, Drew, you kind of alluded to the media as a factor for you. Like, how did you end up going for Trump? What was the journey to get there?
I would say that it started with the Biden election and the Hunter Biden laptop scandal. That was very concerning of how manipulative the media was and how much people were willing to not question that. And so in that election, I decided not to vote for any presidential candidate. I believe I wrote in Andrew Yang. And then following the scandal where he dropped out after the debate, it became concerning. I mean, we have posts on Twitter right now where Jill Biden is leading cabinet meetings, and it's just not really the flow and the structure of how our country wants to be. And then there's a lot of other manipulation. We saw it with Andrew Yang's candidacy. We continue to see it with manipulation of Google headlines and upvoting or downvoting certain content on multiple media platforms. And if you're just paying attention to those factors and then decide to take a deep dive. So this, like, the biggest thing that convinced me was Ben Carson. He's one of these significant figures in the Black community. He was loved by all, both Democrats and Republicans. And then when he came in office, a lot of the articles were very negative, and I believed a lot of the things that they said. Then he did an interview with Tucker Carlson, and then his values and J.D. Vance also emphasizing family values. that really touched home. And if somebody like that, when I listened to them, because I didn't follow the Republican, the 2020 race, so I really wanted to, get an understanding of what was going on. So just hearing him talk and support Trump as a very, very strong Christian, that really changed my opinion of and the perspective of Trump. And then there are multiple other people in the Black community that were leaders that were starting to speak out, but they didn't speak out in 2020, just to say that he's not as bad as people think. And if he was racist, he would have been racist his entire life. So that's really those are the big points.
Yeah. So it definitely sounds like your concerns about the media, kind of interpreting or biasing information for, some putting their thumb on the scale is very offensive to you for obvious reasons. Is there, and then I guess the second thing I'm hearing is there's also, is there something about Trump, like, let's say the media treated him in your eyes fairly. Is there something that he brings that you think, Kamala doesn't, let's say?
So if you intellectually listen to things he said in the debate, clearly from 2020 to 2024, I don't think that we're better off. And so I feel like that's not even debatable. So the question is, who do you trust to fix some of the problems that have been created? Even if you don't blame Kamala and Biden for the problems, it's who can you inherently trust to solve those solutions? And so Kamala Harris has not been able to provide a cogent solution that has logical flow. And while you may disagree with his idea of, drill baby drill, anti-immigration stance, some of the things that he commented on was specifically the war in the Middle East being related to Iran getting funding from oil deals and embargoes that were lifted during the Biden administration, funding Hezbollah. So that's a significant logical flow that I can follow, that I can say, okay, he seems to understand the problem. He has a solution. And if you are somebody who believes in, his idea and workflow, you can bring that to the table. I don't really have an idea of what kind of solutions Kamala Harris would bring, and the fact that she doesn't do interviews to clarify those points is a major concern. So I do think, objectively, he presents a solution. Whether or not you want to buy it or trust it, that's up to you. But he does have solutions that I can buy and that I believe in, even as an objective and a non-Trump supporter for the last two prior elections.
All right. Thanks, Drew. Zeus, what's you kind of alluded to your some of your feelings, but kind of expand a little more, like why Trump instead of Kamala?
Yeah. I mean, look, my biggest two things in this order are the future economic growth of this country, making sure that people aren't broke so they can afford homes and actually do something with their money. And then not as important, because you can kind of shield yourself from it, but the degenerate, disgusting culture of the liberals in power, all this gay shit and all of this forced diversity and all of this, and of course, and that goes hand in hand with immigration. The way that you're just allowing random foreigners to come into the country and do whatever they want, it's disgusting and it's not good. So I'm opposed to all of that, and I'm sure you're aware of that. You see me on Twitter. I like to comment on your post too. But so basically, I'm just opposed to the entire ruling class, and Trump, he's not part of that.
All right, thanks, Zeus. Phil, we've had three Trump supporters in a row. What's the case for Harris? Why are you voting for her?
Yes, the reason that me, Andrew Yang, and Dean Phillips are all voting for Kamala Harris, one, because Trump is just unfit, weak, and dishonest. And we can see that from his coup attempts, from him getting crushed in the debate by Kamala Harris, and from his inability to put forward anything more than a concept of a plan. And after 9 years of running for president, Kamala Harris, on the other hand, is qualified. She's smart and strong. You can see this from her clear plans for how we're going to build more housing, how we're going to create more small businesses, expand the child tax credit, put more money into working people's pockets. And, above all else, I love the fact that she's not a convicted felon. I love the fact she didn't try a coup attempt in 2020. And those are big issues, too, that I'm really excited about for Kamala Harris, to protect our democracy, expand our economy, and have just a person in government who actually cares about solutions and doesn't just try and, destroy immigration bills because they don't want to help their opponent, or someone who tries to overturn elections because they're upset about the results. So I think it's a very easy choice. Easiest vote I'll ever make is for Kamala Harris.
All right. I'm sure. I know. I see some heads turning. I know Drew, you disagree, so we're gonna get some kind of follow up comments after we get through Nick and myself. But Nick, you're going for Chase Oliver, the Libertarian. Tell us why.
So I am not totally numb to the fact that he's not going to win. I totally understand that. I do understand that the two-party system in our country it's led us nowhere. I mean, we just pass the ball back and forth. These two different parties that they say are different, but that we seem to get the same outcome from both ones. We get more wars, we get more debt. Our civil liberties are increasingly evaporating, and there needs to be a viable third party in this country that can stand up to, whether you call it the duopoly or the uniparty of the Republicans and the Democrats. It's the same thing with it's two sides of the same terrible coin, in my opinion. I share Drew's opinion that Trump is not being treated fairly in the media. I do think that most of the mainstream media, up until about 6 weeks ago, was saying that Kamala Harris was maybe we should pick a new vice president, XYZ. I mean, they were not on the Kamala train, and now all of a sudden it's just like, it's wild to think that everyone could just 180 flip for her. But I think it's also a little bit more wild that there's not any discussion about either Jill Stein. There was barely any discussion about RFK, and you hear crickets about Chase Oliver, somebody that if people were to take a quiz on what they value most in their daily lives, I think that most people would align themselves more with the Libertarian Party, but they just hear nothing about it in the media. They hear nothing about it from, yard signs and friends and family. And I think that supporting libertarian values and the Libertarian Party, if it can get more eyes in the situation, if I can have one person or two people and they can tell two people and they can tell two people about what we stand for, I think that's a positive thing. And I think that, I call myself the reasonable libertarian on Twitter. I think there's a lot of out there people in the Libertarian Party. I think there's a lot of people that give libertarians a bad name. And I kind of want to stand there and be the type of person that says, yes, I can see your side. Yes, I can see your side. I'm not for anarchy. I'm not for abolishing borders or whatever. I think that there's a middle ground that is rooted in liberty that we need to stand up for. And that's why I support Chase Oliver, because his policy of minarchy is not anarchy, but it's minimizing the state and it's minimizing the federal government's control over your life.
And just a quick follow-up, Nick. Do you, some of our Trump supporters here have referenced that, he is a little bit of a rule breaker, like maybe in a good way. Like he's not part of the establishment. Do you see him as part of the uniparty, or like, isn't he a disruptor?
I do think that the media is scared of him for a reason, because he is a disruptor. I think the fact that, he didn't back out of Afghanistan. He did lay the groundwork to back out of Afghanistan. I'll give him that. And then Joe Biden totally fumbled that ball. I do see him as a disruptor, but I don't see him as having a cogent plan. He is just a dog chasing cars, and then as soon as he catches one, he doesn't really know what to do with it. He wants to cut taxes, but then he doesn't cut spending, so our deficit goes up. There's not a lot about him that I see that is the most positive, but the fact that they're trying so hard to get rid of him, I can see how he can be a disruptor.
Okay. I'll give everybody my thought process, and then I'd love to kind of hear from Drew, because I saw some head shaking during Phil's discussion, so I'd be curious to hear why you might disagree with Phil, and then Phil will give you an opportunity to share some more context. So for me, I'm supporting Harris mainly because of Trump. I don't trust him. And so for me, it's character, judgment, and capacity for performance. And character. So for character, I don't. In my opinion, I find that he is not truthful, uses a lot of hyperbole or exaggeration to kind of stir people up, or I actually think he manipulates people with his narratives. I don't like that. Judgment. I look at the types of people that he surrounds himself with, the types of people he hires, and then how they go from being like the best in the world to like, like a terrible general, or, things he says about John Kelly or Mattis, nobody who has worked with him in the past seems to want to support him after they've worked with him. And then third, he's just really old. He's the same reason why I didn't like Biden. He's old. I saw it in the last debate. I have family members that are aging, and they're amazing, and they've done amazing things. I don't think they've got, the physical strength or the mental kind of cognitive ability to do that job. And it's a really hard job. It takes a lot out of you. So that's me. But let's go to Drew, and then we'll open it up. Then Phil, and then we can open up. Drew, I saw you weren't in full agreement with Phil. Any particular areas where you're like, hey, man, I just look at it a different way. I don't come to that conclusion.
I appreciate your comments, Tom. I do think that if you look at Trump's first time in office, it was a cluster fire. He was not expected to win the election. He was surrounded by a bunch of grifters politically. Michael Cohen, Giuliani didn't do himself much of a service while he was there. And he just wasn't ready and prepared to be a president, I think. And I do think, though, what he said he was going to do, he did. Again, it was tumultuous. He came out with a Muslim ban. I didn't vote for him, so that was not something I was expecting. He sent our troops to the border very early on in his presidency. So these are things that he stood for, and then he did exactly what he said. And there was a bunch of people that were in his administration that probably shouldn't have been there or been that close to power. He fired a bunch of them. There was a lot of animosity amongst some others that he probably didn't agree with his viewpoints. So I think that all of those concerns are legitimate, Tom. But I think in terms of this administration, when he's bringing in RFK Jr. As well as Tulsi Gabbard, probably the most respected female political figure that I have, and really the Republican Party is not the Republican Party. So I think there's a lot of resentment even amongst hardcore establishment Republicans. He just doesn't stand for a lot of the things that they value necessarily. He's throwing them bones, and he's on some of their platforms in terms of supporting them. But I don't think that he's a traditional Republican. Which, if you are a Republican who supported the party for a long time, it may be a little bit unsettling. But going back to some of the concerns that Phil brought up, so the fact that the lawfare, January 6th, I think those things are very contentious, and a lot of Trump supporters who've gone down the rabbit hole can tell you why they're not as big of a deal as some of the Democrat supporters are. But I think one of the biggest things that is a lie from the Kamala Harris campaign is that they can't do anything about the border. And then also, this is the point that doesn't get bring up, that they can't do anything about abortion. So Roe got overturned 2 years ago. They made no action. There was no marches. There was no bills on Congress. That's their number one issue, and there's no action on that. And then in terms of the border, you can send troops to the border tomorrow via executive action. You don't need a bill. So I think that when it comes down to it, I can't trust Kamala Harris to do anything because it's political rhetoric. And then in terms of action, I know that she's not going to necessarily follow through with any of her rhetoric because she's had opportunities to make a stand or make a speech or stimulate people and citizens, and really they're not doing that. And so I just can't trust that as a voter personally. I know Trump is a little bit wild, but he's going to do exactly what he says.
All right, thanks, Drew. Phil, what do you think about that?
It's just respectfully, I don't think he really responded to the point that he tried to overturn the election. And
talk about it.
Yeah, but I think it's a big thing to talk about. The first non-peaceful transfer of power, I think it's a pretty big deal. On the border crossings are down. They're actually lower than they were in September of 2020 under Trump right now. And that's also given the fact that he destroyed the bipartisan border bill. You said that Democrats did nothing on the after Roe v. Wade was overturned by Trump's 3 Supreme Court justices. That actually was a promise that Trump made and he kept, which was to overturn Roe v. Wade. After that happened, Senate and under the leadership of Biden and Harris, the House passed a bill to codify Roe v. Wade. The Senate tried to pass the bill. Unfortunately, every single Republican and Joe Manchin voted against it, and every other Democrat voted for it. So unfortunately, just like with the bills to protect the right to IVF, Republicans blocked it. And I'm sure if Trump wins, you can expect the same thing. Roe v. Wade protections for abortion, IVF, will continue to be blocked. But if Kamala wins, you'll have a president who won't veto an abortion bill, as J.D. Vance says Trump will, but instead a president who will sign a Roe v. Wade bill to protect IVF and abortion rights. So you mentioned lawfare too. I mean, I think the easiest explanation for why Trump keeps going to court for crimes is that he committed crimes. I mean, I'm sorry, you don't get to try and overturn elections. You don't get to do fraudulent business dealings. You don't get to keep classified documents and not return them when the FBI comes to you and says, hey, we need these documents back. Can you please give it to us? So, I mean, I think the whole kind of case for Trump kind of collapses a bit when you actually look at the actual substance of each of these claims. I mean, the truth is he's just kind of a weak, dishonest guy who can't handle the fact that he lost in 2020. And all the people that were around Trump that held his administration together at least a little bit, all of them are going to not be there next time. You mentioned Giuliani as a real concern of who was not a good advisor for Trump. He's probably Trump's attorney general under the next Trump administration. So, I mean, I just think that at the end of the day, if Trump wins, he's going to have the most incompetent people around him, people like Laura Loomer, who's a 9/11 conspiracy theorist. And I just think I'm kind of concerned about a convicted felon who tried to overturn an election becoming the most powerful person in this entire country once again. Doesn't seem like a good idea.
Zeus, you were kind of shaking your head when Phil was talking. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, look, no election was attempted to be overturned. It was a mostly peaceful protest, just how the BLM riots burned down multiple cities, and those were mostly peaceful protests. The very small amount of people that went to the Capitol peacefully protested. Sure, the cops killed a woman, but the Trump supporters didn't kill nobody. And the thing is, what was the other thing you were just talking about? You were talking about the mostly peaceful protests, and what else? Remind me, Phil.
So Trump overturned Roe v. Wade. Kamala Harris is going to bring back. Trump killed the border deal. Kamala Harris is going to sign that. And Trump committed a lot of felonies too. And so.
Oh, yes. Liberals think he's a criminal, which he's not. He's perfectly clean. And it makes sense that the courts that the left controls are doing everything they can to try to put him in a cage. And as we're witnessing, the cage is not working. So now they're trying to kill him. And the bullet might have grazed him, but thankfully he missed it, And so, yes, the left is going to try to kill him and throw him in a cage and use the power they hold to try to, hold him down, which makes sense. Look, power is about rewarding your friends and punishing your enemies, which is why, as you guys being members of the left, fully understand that he will punish his enemies, as he should, rightfully. And as far as the border goes, look, Kamala she's like Sleepy Joe. She's like a hollow person that has no mind. She's just a puppet. Excuse me, I almost swear. She's just a puppet, just like him. A slightly better looking, younger puppet, but still a puppet with no soul, no mind. So whatever the Democrats need her to say, she's gonna say. She's gonna play her her role well. She's gonna cackle and smile for the cameras and take absolutely zero interviews, which is fine. She's a loyal soldier. Now, it's very simple. You can choose the establishment, the people in power, which we're seeing what they're doing. Ask your neighbors how much money they have, check out the economy, or you can support something that opposes that disgusting regime.
Thank you,
Zeus. All right, Phil, you want to make a quick response?
Just real quick. Political violence is never okay. It doesn't matter if it's Nancy Pelosi's husband, Trump, anyone. Never okay. And so I really hate the idea of using the word the leftist.
So why did Kamala break out the mostly peaceful protests when they burned that city down in Kenosha? Why did that happen if it's not okay?
Yeah, rioting is not okay. I agree. But Kamala Harris contributed to a bail fund that she also said that we should protest peacefully. Trump, on the other hand, riled up a bunch of people to go and sack the Capitol, and then is talking about now he's going to pardon the people who attacked police officers.
They should all be pardoned.
Worse. Okay, you agree. You think that people who attack police officers at Capitol should be pardoned?
Political violence is bad.
That's your opinion. I disagree with that, and I think Trump agrees with you.
Violence is bad. Political
I
violence
mean,
is
I
bad.
think this January 6th discussion is really gonna just result in chaos. That's why I didn't want to bring it up, and we're kind of in chaos right now.
Yeah, we're never going to agree on this. Obviously, they think it's the worst thing in the world, and I'm just being honest. It was a mostly peaceful protest.
Can I ask, have any of you read any of the indictments about Trump?
Yes.
So I
There-
have read and
please.
I've looked into multiple different of the indictments. And so one of the things that's concerning is that the indictment is something that Hillary Clinton violated documents, Joe Biden violated documents, and Trump violated documents. So I think that in general, like, I don't feel like we should be persecuting people who are elected leaders for something that multiple different administrations, it's a law, you want to respect the law, but the documents indictment really is something that's a non-starter. And then
Did Kamala
And
Harris
that's
keep documents?
100% true. I mean,
yeah, like let's
they've
move on.
both
from that.
done
It's
it. They've
ridiculous.
all done it. Hillary Clinton did it. It doesn't matter, and that's what his finger pointing back and forth on character and on no substance makes no sense to me.
Yeah,
I
let's
mean,
talk
why are
about
we
policy.
why are we not talking about policy? It was the same thing in the debate between the two candidates. They barely talked. I mean, Kamala Harris never talks about policy, but
Wait. She said
Trump
she
Trump
should have housing
barely
plan,
talks
her
about
small
policy.
business plan. She's talked about a child tax credit. How she increased the income tax credit. She talked a lot about policies. It's Trump who had the concepts of a plan.
And Trump has a concept of a healthcare plan. And this is what I'm saying. So like you can jump onto your sides and you can say like, oh, you can dig your heels and say my guy's better. But if you look at policies and see how they actually affect your everyday life, I mean, I kind of don't understand either side. And I know that I'm the outsider here. I mean, I know my guy's going to get 3 or hopefully 3%. We'll see. But I can't see why everyone says I'm voting for this person because he's not that person. The lesser of two evils voting makes no sense to me.
I agree.
Go ahead, Jeremy.
I think Nick makes some excellent points. I think the problem with the Libertarian Party and Chase Oliver this cycle is just Chase Oliver. I think if Rexenwald had got the nomination, if Mike Tremont, his VP, had got the nomination, I think I would be way more inclined to vote Libertarian this cycle. But Chase Oliver,
what is it about Chase Oliver you don't like?
Well, I'm not big on his pro gain of function research policy or position. I think that's a super crazy thing to have post COVID.
Pro gain of function research. He does not have that policy.
I said I'll hit you up after this discussion.
Okay.
He's way more lenient on border policy. I think his position on trans rights and children is concerning.
That does concern me.
I think the Libertarian. Yes, I think the Libertarian Party did themselves a huge disservice this cycle. If I do end up casting a vote for Libertarian in November, it'd be just in hopes that they get their shit together for 2028, and so they maybe don't lose ballot access in half the states that they currently have it.
And that's part of the reason why I'm voting Libertarian is because I really truly believe that we're the most viable third party. As long as people actually stop talking about whatever they're talking about on Fox News and CNN and look at issues, but it doesn't seem to ever happen.
All right, let's switch
Right.
gears.
Also, if I can make one last point here too. Trump coming out and speaking at the Libertarian Convention this year was huge. Him promising to have a Libertarian put in the cabinet is a big deal. Him committing the sentence of Russ Ulbricht is a big deal. So there's an interesting coalition on the Libertarian side here too. So I just want to make that note here too.
Thank you, Jeremy. Okay, so we're going to switch gears a little bit. Maybe we'll start with Nick since you brought it up, and then we'll see who wants to weigh in. I'd love to talk about the economy. Nick, you alluded to deficits. Nobody really talks about deficits. What's your view on them? Like, what do you think about the future of this country?
I mean, it's obviously not on a sustainable path. The interest on the debt alone is now more than the military budget, and that's a crazy fact that a lot of people don't know. When you have debts and when our debt is at that level and our annual deficit is increasing every year because of the number, I don't see how there's any way out of it. And modern monetary theory and modern monetary policy is not something that is going to last for very long. Libertarians, we want to reduce government spending, and we actually want to reduce government spending, not just say it. I mean, Trump said it, but he never did it. And he's saying it this time. And so it makes me say, why should we trust him again? George Bush said, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, you ain't gonna fool me again. I know that wasn't the correct quote, but that's what George Bush said. I can't see, again, it's same two sides of the same coin. It doesn't matter if it's Bush, Obama, Trump, or Biden. The debt goes up. The military industrial complex continues to bombard people around the world, and our civil liberties continue to be eroded. And I just don't understand why we can bicker about the small things, but not actually touch upon the bigger things that will affect our lives and the lives of our children.
I have a comment.
Yeah.
So I think that any candidate saying that they're going to reduce the debt, you can't take them at face value, but then you have to look at their specific approach to how they would reduce the debt. And so it's two of the issues that got brought up. One is just fraud, waste, and abuse. The government spends a lot of money specifically to attack Kamala. There's like a $42 billion deal to bring internet to rural areas, and they haven't spent, or they haven't received any of the amount of internet after more than years. And then so how do we like make a government more efficient? So deregulation and just getting rid of government agencies. So one of the things that's on Trump's platform is to get rid of the Department of Education. So in New Jersey, we don't need a national Department of Education to really improve our education because we did really well in high school. I went to a college, went to medical school. So a lot of that is just wasted money. And so, and then, you know, Elon Musk gets brought up here and there, and I'm a big fan of his. And so government efficiency is important. And if you read his books and looked at the Boeing versus, you know, NASA versus, you know, the contract that he has with his company, you can see that like we can do things much more efficiently. And it's hard to like say, pin down, hey, I'm going to bring down the debt if your spending goes up. But if you have specific policies to get rid of government agencies and excess spending, I think that will help with that. Even though he didn't do that in his first administration, I do believe that he potentially could do that with those specific actions.
Phil, you want to make the case for why? Well, what's your view on the deficit and your candidate choice?
Yeah, I think it's really important to take on the deficit. I think that independent analysis of all the Kamala Harris policies, all Trump policies, clearly show that Kamala Harris's policies are 1/5 of the deficit busters that Trump's policies are, and it doesn't take a lot to understand why. You know, Trump's saying, we're gonna, eliminate pander to this group and this group, and eliminate all these different taxes. We're gonna have huge tariffs that are going to absolutely crush the economy and raise costs for families. I mean, he doesn't really have much of a plan, but it seems from, as you mentioned, his last 4 years, it was just spend, all while the economy was doing pretty well. So it feels like he is never going to be the one to actually, lower the deficit at all. I mean, makes sense. He got bankrupt again and again and again. So it's not like he has a lot of, financial gravitas, especially because he was recently, I think, found liable for fraud as well. So I can't imagine a worse person to put in charge of the federal government than the guy who was found liable for fraud, went bankrupt, and then all of his plans increased the deficit enormously. And then on the economic policy, I think that Kamala Harris has actually a really good understanding of how we can actually support working families, increase more housing. Trump, on the other hand, says, I don't want any more, he doesn't want to build more housing, but Kamala understands that a lot of regulations at local levels really decrease the supply of housing. And that makes it simple economics. Less supply of housing means costs are going to go up. And so she's going to take on that supply problem, increase 3 million more houses is the goal. And at this time, she also wants to give a $6,000 child tax credit for newborn first year of life babies, because it's really important to support new families and allow them to really invest in children. Unlike, Trump, who of course doesn't support things like food stamps. Kamala Harris, on the other hand, expanded food stamps while she was president, which is a really good thing because, again, we're supporting working families. I think overall analysis seemed to show that Trump's plans would all raise costs, not do as good on GDP, and increase deficit way more than Kamala Harris's plans. And, that's a really good thing for Kamala Harris because her plans actually make sense, are more reasonable, and aren't just like things she does to appeal to a few billionaire donors like Elon Musk or oil companies.
I think that, how old are you, Phil?
I am 25.
All right. So like a lot of people, and this is a little bit of bias, say that you wouldn't have very much lived experience about how the world is and like the realities of life. Just like in the last 4 years, the cost of an average home went up approximately $100,000, and the cost of a down payment went up to $17,000, and the monthly mortgage payment went from $1,300 a month to $2,300 a month. So while you're in college and you're kind of enjoying like the that bubble there, like the people on the ground and the opinions that you're displaying are not the realities of what people are experiencing. So like, again, it's whether or not you trust what you're saying. So that's what I'm saying is like, it's about who you're going to trust to fix those problems And I'm not saying anything that you like the numbers and the data, like they look great on paper, but it's a matter of who do you trust. And so people seeing that the Democrats being in office and this thing's moved over the last 4 years in such a drastic direction where it's unaffordable to buy a home. Like they're making real life decisions on how am I going to start my family? Am I going to go to a wedding and like pay $20,000-$30,000 for that? So those are real decisions that real people are facing. And so like your analysis doesn't really like factor in what people are actually going through, which is kind of unfortunate. It really is.
But respectfully, you're not doing an actual analysis. You're saying this happened in 4 years and this happened in 4 years. So I have to assume that Kamala Harris, who's president, would do everything the same as the 4 years, and Trump would do everything the same as the first 4 years. What I'm actually doing is saying, let's look at the actual policies that they're both proposing and what those actual policies would do. And independent analysis have shown Kamala Harris's policies will lower inflation, lower costs, and Trump's will increase it. It makes sense also because Trump's plan for the economy, he thinks everything can be paid with a tariff. So he wants to do, I think, 10 or maybe change it recently, 20% tariff on all goods coming to the United States, which is the worst economic idea you could probably think of in the world, because that means everything we buy is going to have an extra tax on it. So if you're worried about cost, I think it's a very legitimate concern about cost.
There are tariffs that the Biden administration kept that Trump kept.
That is a great point. And you know what the key to tariffs is? Doing them in a targeted way that actually supports growing industries that are important to the U.S. Not in a blanket way where everything from avocados to cars are all increasing in prices. That's not actually a smart policy. Kamala Harris and Biden were using targeted tariffs. Trump wants a blanket tariff over everything. That's how you raise price on everything.
I don't think he does.
And that's exactly why the working class does not support, Sleepy Joe and this retarded woman, because you guys are really good at like painting a pretty picture. Hold on, give me a second. Let me talk. You guys paint a really good picture, and you guys like talk about the number and the experts and all this stuff, and you don't actually look at what's actually happening in reality. Like Drew brilliantly explained, in reality, it's much more expensive over these last 4 years of Sleepy Joe's presidency. People are hurting. People's savings have gone down. Inflation is through the roof. So you can talk about the numbers and the experts and the graphs and all this nonsense, or you can actually look at how people are living in reality. Why do you think the Teamsters won't endorse your candidates?
Actually, the Teamsters in Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania all endorsed it.
No. The whole organization. What did it just say 2 days ago?
Yeah, I think in California, Nevada, I believe endorsed Harris, and
the UAW
endorsed Harris.
Union
after union is endorsing Harris.
Yes, you're dodging the question. The liberal states, of course, they're going to endorse him. But
is
the
Michigan and
national
Wisconsin liberal states?
I actually don't know. I've never been there, but whatever.
Okay.
You're certain individual states will do what they're going to do, but the national Teamsters Union, they're not going to endorse the Democrats, which they usually endorse.
They endorse Trump?
No, they're not going to. Of course, they're not going to endorse Trump. That's like, you can't endorse him. He's the worst. But they're not going to endorse your candidates, which is beautiful.
Can we talk about more policy or something?
All right, let me give a shot because I feel like Phil's the lone Kamala supporter here. Let me weigh in a little bit. I actually think there's something that's coming up which is fair, which is that inflation has been really painful and harsh for everybody. And we got to acknowledge that. For me, it's like, well, do I think Trump would be better for inflation? I don't, because I think if you increase the deficit, that's not good for inflation. It generally will kind of raise the rates for the country to borrow. And the things that he's cutting, okay, Department of Education, it's not that big of a budget item. If you really want to get deficits under control, you do have to look at things like Social Security, Medicare, defense. He's not going to cut any of those. He's even said he wouldn't. Now, I don't know that Kamala would cut those either. I doubt she would, but at least she isn't dropping taxes left and right without paying for them.
Well,
so
she's
like,
going to have
me,
to increase taxes, though, because if she's going to let the Trump tax cuts expire in 2025, that is going to increase taxes.
That would increase taxes on the rich, which I personally benefited from those. Well, mainly the rich would benefit.
And Nick isn't factoring in the earned income tax credit and the child tax credit expansions, which would cut taxes for about 100 million Americans.
So, Nick, as the reasonable libertarian, would you agree that all of these tax cuts that Trump is proposing, like, he isn't saying how he's going to pay for them? I think he's saying like maybe the economy will grow later on, but they always say that.
Yeah, Nick Gillespie from Reason Magazine, he's a libertarian journalist, asked him, how is he going to grow out of the deficit? And he said, drill, baby, drill. It's not a plan. It's not a plan. I mean, I'm not saying that it shouldn't happen and we should deregulate the oil and gas industry. I don't think that we should be giving them any more government handouts by any means, but I don't think that we should be tying their hands behind their back and then telling them to be effectively what is the engine of America and the lifeblood of our country. I'm sorry, your question again was, I apologize.
Do you think Trump will have lower deficits?
Absolutely not. I mean, I don't, he might have lower deficits. I mean, than Kamala Harris, but he won't, it'll still keep growing. I mean, it might be a reduction in the growth of deficits, but it's still going to grow. And I don't see why people don't understand that that's not a sustainable solution.
Okay, we're going to move on to our another topic. We'll start with you, Jeremy. I'd love to talk about foreign policy. Yeah, Jeremy, why don't we start with you? What's your take on how Trump or Harris or Oliver would do on foreign policy, and why might you lean Trump?
I think Trump. Well, first let me say I think Jill Stein probably actually has the best foreign policy. Next would be Chase Oliver, but unfortunately they're just not viable candidates. So given the choice between Kamala Harris, who's just endorsed by the Cheneys and a lot of the neocon Republican establishment, I think Trump just becomes the obvious choice. And I think that's all there is to say about it. Well, I guess you could say that I wish he was better on Israel. I wish Trump was better on Israel. I wish Kamala was better on Israel. But on everything else, I think Trump just is the obvious choice. But when it comes to Syria, Yemen,
Ukraine,
further expansion, and absolutely Ukraine. I think the Joe Biden administration was an absolute disaster for Ukraine. I mean, it didn't. People want to start the clock, like when Putin invaded. It started way before that. And that really goes back to the Bush administration saying they wanted to put Ukraine in NATO. So this is really 20 years plus in the making, and it's really just been a result of neocon establishment, Washington thinking that has got us where we are today in Ukraine, and not really a specific administration. The blame's on everybody.
Who else wants to talk about? Oh, Drew, you had some thoughts.
Yeah, I think that Trump's approach to foreign policy, we saw a little bit when he was willing to meet with North Korea and Kim Jong-il. He talked about having conversations with Putin. And then one of the things that was kind of shocking in the debate was that Kamala Harris had bragged about going to the Ukraine to speak with Zelensky to negotiate peace. And then Trump's retort was like, wait, you went to negotiate peace, you didn't talk to Putin, and we were at war 3 days later. And now there are articles about long-range missiles being sent into Russia. And for somebody who's in the military and who has concerns about what I'm going to be doing in the military, it's frankly concerning that the Democratic just general philosophy is put us in more wars in this administration, significantly more than the Trump administration. And then a big concern here is also Kamala Harris. So people say, oh, she doesn't need to do interviews. It's not politically advantageous. But it's concerning that I would be fearful that if she can't talk to reporters, how is she going to be a successful diplomat? Her record isn't great. And then her lack of interviewing is even more concerning. So I really feel like if you believe that we have any hope of changing, again, the status quo is the status quo, and that's what we are. I think that if you want any kind of change in foreign policy, then you need a change of administration, whether that's Trump or another administration. But clearly what they're doing right now is not working. And Trump's willing to talk and negotiate with these other administrations, these other leaders, doing things that no other president has ever done before. I think that really sets a different tone, different direction. He was able to get money out of NATO. So I think that the status quo to me is very concerning for World War III. And I do think that we need a change.
Okay. Phil, what's your take on foreign policy from the Harris supporter point of view?
Yeah, I mean, I think that one of the most effective treaties that has kept a lot more peace is NATO. And Kamala Harris stands behind NATO. She stands behind our allies, Ukraine, to make sure that we defend against despots and dictators like Putin. Now, of course, Trump cozies up to them because they flatter him and he's easily manipulated. But Kamala Harris actually stands by our allies. And partly because she does that, she's able to get things done, like assisting Biden with getting one of the biggest hostage deal, I believe, done since the Cold War. That was because we used our allies effectively to get those hostages home. On Ukraine, Trump couldn't even say at the debate whether he wanted Ukraine to win the war. Like, what are we talking about here? This guy doesn't know what he thinks is good. Once in a while, he'll say he wants Ukraine. He doesn't even want Ukraine to win. Like, what are we talking about? He doesn't support our allies in any way at all. That's why all leaders across the world all are praying that Trump does not win, because they know he'd be terrible for the entire world and world peace as a whole. In Israel, we want to do a ceasefire deal, get the hostages home. Trump, he doesn't care about that at all. He doesn't care about the hostages. And he praises Viktor Orban. At the debate, he praised the Viktor Orban. Like, this is not a guy who can ever stand up to any dictator ever, because he wants to be one himself. And so I just think it's his foreign policy is a joke. It's just whoever has his ear at the last second, whoever flatters him, that's who he's going to support. And I kind of like a leader who's a little bit more stable, actually has a philosophy about working with our allies, not just jacking up tariffs. And you made the point too about NATO, about how Trump got countries to pay more in NATO. Okay, Kamala Harris and Joe Biden got even more countries to pay more in NATO. So by your own metric, Kamala Harris was way better at that than Trump. And I just think in general, the U.S. should be a leader in the world. We're a great country, and I want us to stay a leader. And unfortunately, Trump wants us to shrink into onto our shadows and not take any strong action on the world stage. And I just think we're a safer world and we're a safer country when we work with our allies. And Trump can't do that because he only cares about himself.
All right, I'll share some thoughts, and then maybe we'll open up if anybody else has any further follow-on thoughts on foreign policy, and then we'll do some closing observations. My thoughts on foreign policy are, I am for Harris because, number one, I find Trump to be kind of impulsive, and I don't think that's good for foreign policy or for business. Like, people want stability, businesses want predictability. But then the second thing is, I'm pretty sure he would let Netanyahu do whatever the hell he wanted in the Middle East, and I worry that Netanyahu's going to drag us into another forever conflict in the Middle East. I think Harris would support Israel, but probably would be more with like the moderates in Israel, like not the Likud Israel. So for that reason, I definitely am more comfortable going to bed with Harris in the White House than if Trump were there. But any other thoughts on foreign policy before we go with closing thoughts?
I think this is going to be a big point that turns the election, because New Jersey is a very, very Jewish state and a Jewish community. And so one of the things that a lot of people in my high school did was go back to Israel for birthright. You have Americans dying. So like, there's one thing to have a perspective that's framed of, hey, this is a great foreign policy, but it's another perspective when your friends, your family members have died and they've lost their lives. And so like, whatever your point is, like, they died on the Biden-Harris administration watch. It's a bloodbath over there. And it's a really concern. It's not a like, hey, status quo, like we need to just continue our current policy. Like, we need rapid action. Like, we need to bring these people back home. Like, we need to save these lives. And it's very concerning. Like, it's not a like, hey, like, just take it easy, like, relax. It'll kind of work its way out. This is a big issue. And I think it's going to change like the course of the election and maybe politics in general. If like the Jewish community or any community that feels strongly about this one issue, like votes a certain kind of way, it's really going to change how politics are shaped long term.
This is a Jewish American. I'm not voting for Trump, who has Nick Fuentes that is dining his Mar-a-Lago and says anti-Semitic stuff all the time. I'm not voting for Trump. And I think a lot of Jewish people feel the same way.
I feel like Jewish people, and I can't speak for either of these two communities, not being either one of them, but Jewish people, and it seems like African Americans and Hispanics this time around, for that matter, it seems like to me going to be voting more for Trump. I will say that as an outside observer. I know that the Jewish community generally votes heavily left. I know that the Black community generally votes heavily left, but I don't see that happening this time around. I have nothing to go off of that, just from people I talk to, again, being from Northern New Jersey. I went to more bar mitzvahs and bat mitzvahs than I went to church back in my middle school days. But from what I'm hearing, people who would be reliably left are considering Trump this time. I will say that.
Well, it's definitely going to be a
I
hot
could just-
issue. And go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to say, I think if your concerns are maybe not so much with Israel, but a broader regional war, for instance, a war with Iran, I think Kamala Harris is way more to be persuaded by her generals in the military-industrial complex to be more hawkish, more proactive on that front than Trump would.
Okay, let's wrap it up. This has been a really awesome conversation. I think I'm going to go counterclockwise. We'll start with Nick and then wrap around. What are your final thoughts on either this conversation or any other kind of arguments that you want to make for your candidate?
Yeah, I thank you for having me. I like to follow you online. I followed you today, but I definitely look at your stuff a lot, so I appreciate you having me on. Again, I don't speak for the Chase Oliver campaign, but I will say that I voted for Obama my first time in 2008. I was so proud of that vote. And then I saw what he was doing, and I wasn't impressed. I voted for Mitt Romney, 2012. Saw what he didn't win, but I didn't sleep well that night after I voted for Mitt Romney. In 2016, when I voted for Gary Johnson, I was looking at what he was standing for, issue by issue, policy by policy. And I said, after I cast that vote, I wasn't thinking that he was going to win the election, but I did think that night I can sleep soundly knowing that I believe that he's the best candidate that aligns most with my values. Not what the media told me, not what the military industrial complex and the pharmaceutical industrial complex is trying to drill into our heads on a daily basis. Chase Oliver is an authentic person. Do I believe with every single one of his platform policies? No, but I align most with him. And I can see that he has a good heart. He's not influenced by big money, big power. He just wants what's best for this country. And I don't know how else to say it, but that's who I want to support. I want to support somebody who is authentically themselves and can communicate a message of liberty, of bringing the government as close to you as possible. The federal government is way too far out of control, and we need to rein it back. We need to bring it closer to the states, counties, cities, and even into our own families and lives.
Thank you, Nick. Phil.
Yeah, so basically to wrap up my points, I think Trump is an old, unfit, weak, and dishonest man. And, courts found him liable for sexual abuse. He's been indicted for his actions on January 6th. He's a convicted felon. He's been liable for fraud. He called for the suspension of the U.S. Constitution. He asked the Secretary of Defense if they could shoot protesters, called fallen soldiers suckers and losers. And he got absurdly crushed again and again at the debate that showed that Kamala Harris is a way better candidate and a way better person than Trump. I think this presidency is way too important to put some kind of old, unqualified, dishonest man at the head of our whole country. And Kamala's got real plans that actually will help real people. I know that the people toward Trump had a few policies. I think the closest was a drill baby drill as the core policy that Trump believes in. I think we deserve a little more specifics than that and more than just the concepts of a plan. Kamala Harris supports $25,000 tax credit for first-time homebuyers and expanding the housing supply by 3 million. She supports expanding the child tax credit, expanding the earned income tax credit, and providing $50,000 tax credits for small businesses to expand small businesses and help working families. She's going to raise the corporate tax rate 28%, not cut corporate taxes because billionaires pay her like they pay Trump. And she is going to make sure that abortion rights, Roe v. Wade, is back as the law of the land, something Trump is responsible for getting rid of. And she will pass the bipartisan border bill that is endorsed by the Border Patrol that Trump killed because he wants to make sure the country is in as bad shape as possible so that he can pretend to be the savior of it. All while studies show he will make inflation worse, he'll make GDP growth worse, and he's going to make the deficit way, way worse. So I just think when it comes down to it, Trump is supremely unfit for this office. I think Kamala is assembling a coalition of Republicans, of moderates and independents like Andrew Yang and Joe Manchin, and at the same time, people on the progressive wing of the party too, like AOC. She is someone who is assembling a large coalition of people because they understand that they want someone in power who is just not a terrible person, who doesn't care about our democracy. And so I'm excited to vote for her. I hope, encourage everyone to vote for it, but also volunteer as well, because it's so important we get every single vote out we can. I am glad that Kamala Harris will accept the results of the election, but unfortunately, Trump refuses to commit to that as well. And so that means we need to landslide Trump, make it undeniable that we won, get every single vote out in every single state, whether it's blue, red, or purple. We need every vote to make it crystal clear, just like it was in 2020, even though Trump couldn't accept it, that Trump is unfit for the office of the White House, and we're not going to let him back in there.
Thank you, Phil. Zeus.
I mean, yeah, look, if you're a fan of forever wars, if you're a fan of rising inflation, if you're a fan of degenerate, disgusting culture, and if you're a fan of the current people in power we've had already for 4 or 5 years, then yeah, vote for the establishment's puppets, vote for these lifeless, soulless people that just stand up there and cackle. Or if you want something to change, or you want an outsider that's actually going to push back on the global homo regime, then maybe vote for Trump 2024. Especially, I know my fellow nationalists are going to vote for him. You know, I just hope that more people can see reality for what it is instead of just listening to the talking heads on TV or looking at the papers or whatever. You know, it's just embrace reality and vote the only logical choice, which is Trump 2024.
Thank you, Zeus. Drew.
One of the best Kess lines I heard from this election was facts, not feelings. So objectively, Trump has expanded his coalition significantly from where he was in 2016. He's got more Black voters, he's got more Hispanic voters, and he didn't do that by, pandering to those specific audiences. People believe the mainstream media and the talking points that Philip very articulately parroted, but in the reality, people they know what they're feeling, and they looked into Trump. They watched hour-long podcasts. They heard him provide cogent responses to questions that he was asked in a whole broad range of issues. The Democratic Party seems to believe that policy and things that are rubber stamped as solid white papers are going to have good outcomes are what people are going to believe and trust. And unfortunately, the people aren't believing that because they're just not seeing that in their daily lives with both their pocketbook spending, inflation. And so regardless of what you can put down as hey, this is what we want to do, it's about what you trust that and believe that they're going to do. And unfortunately, the Democratic Party, with their actions on the media specifically, their actions hiding Joe Biden, the Hunter Biden laptop, their control of Facebook, with Mark Zuckerberg coming out. So it's a matter of whatever you say is somewhat discounted by the fact that you can't trust the source. And at the end of the day, it's very challenging for you to support a Democratic candidate if you can't ultimately trust the source. And then when you want firsthand accounts from the source itself, you just can't get that from Kamala Harris. And so that's really concerning. So I can't support her. And based on a review of Trump, I decided that he's just kind of the best man moving forward.
Thank you, Drew. Jeremy?
Yeah, I think Drew really knocked it out of the park. And just to reiterate that the Democratic Party is now the party of Wall Street, the party of the military-industrial complex, the party of big tech, the party of big pharma. Currently, the United States, we're a 50-50 divided country, but the Democratic Party voters control 70% of the wealth. Republicans control 30%. Republicans are becoming the party of the working class. And if you want to help further this realignment, vote Trump this November. I would really just advise to vote anyone except for Kamala Harris. And thank you very much for having me on tonight, Tom.
You bet, Jeremy. Well, I'm gonna be a Harris supporter. I am gonna say that I would never hire Trump to work at a company that I ever worked at. I wouldn't hire him to be like a principal of a high school for my kids, or I wouldn't want him as my neighbor, to be honest with you. I just don't find him to be an honest person. And for me, character does matter. And he just has crossed too many lines for me. I think secondly, the deficits that we would experience under Trump, combined with higher prices from new tariffs, I think could be an economic disaster for the country. I agree with Nick's point about the deficits being, it's crazy that our debt servicing costs more than our Department of Defense now. And that won't get better if we keep cutting taxes and having unfunded tax cuts. Now for Harris, people will say like, well, you're just saying Orange Man bad, but that's part of it. Like I do believe he's bad. And I have to look at that as part of the decision. Now for Harris, I think she's actually exceeded my expectations so far. I like Walz. I thought she came prepared for that debate. I felt like Trump was winging it. And I want people who want the job and who are going to be really prepared and have attention to detail and be like, take it serious. You know, there are many other candidates that might have been on some imaginary ballot that I might want, but these are the options I have in front of me. So that's why I'm very happy to go with Harris. But what's most important is I think it's really, we're really lucky that the six of us were able to spend some time together. And, you know, maybe we didn't change each other's minds, but I walk away with a little bit more of like, okay, I think I can understand a little bit of where some of these Trump folks are coming from. And I think I understand a little more how the libertarians are looking at things. And, you know, that's good. You know, it's important that we're able to just trade ideas and we'll all participate. Everybody should go vote. Even if you vote for someone that I don't support, it's great. Like, let's all participate. This is what makes this country great. And so thanks, everybody. And I will let you all get back to your weekends. And hopefully you'll have an enjoyable next couple days. And maybe we'll get the gang back together after the election. Hopefully there won't be too much to talk about, but I suspect there will be.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
You got Zeus.
Okay.
Good seeing
Have a
you.
good one.
Later,
Thank you.
everybody. All right. So I'm going to let our guest. All right. Closing thoughts. First of all, that was really fun. We probably should do that again after the VP debate. Maybe I'll do another supporter panel discussion. I think people were, for the most part, pretty respectful. Like, you know, we got a little bit emotional, like we all do. It's fine. But, you know, I thought that was fun. And I'm glad we're able to kind of trade ideas clearly. You know, one of some themes that came up are people really do draw from different sources of information. So one interesting thing was, like, as an example, Phil had referenced the like Goldman Sachs and Wharton School analysis, and there's many others of the Trump impact on deficits. And I think some of our panel on the Trump side were pretty like suspicious of these sources. They're probably like, wow, of course, you know, it's establishment bank or whatever. But, you know, that is a point where, okay, wow, if there's no like shared sources of information, then basically anybody can take any position because you can just say, well, your position is supported by sources that I don't agree with. And then they'll say the same to you. Now, to play devil's advocate, if everybody has the same source of information, then whoever controls that information controls the outcomes, which is not good either. So what we have now is this massively decentralized sources of information, and everybody kind of picks the ones that reinforce their feelings or their intuition or their firsthand experience. And that's I don't know what the solution to that one is, because basically we won't be able to build consensus on anything, right? So that's point one. I think point two is, I do think if you're Harris, you really do need to meet people where they are and acknowledge how difficult the rising prices have been. You know, I think Zeus brought up like, well, you can show all these charts, because if you look at the charts, inflation has come down from a high of 9% in June of 2022 to now like 2.5%. So you look at the charts, like inflation is for sure coming down. Now, that falls on deaf ears because two things. One is people notice price increases more than the absence of subsequent price increases, which is what we are having now, kind of moderated increase in price versus what we used to have. The second thing is that even low inflation doesn't mean the cost of, milk or eggs is going to be less than in 2018 or 2019 or under Obama or whatever, right? Like, so that's just not how inflation works. That's not how prices work. They rarely go down. They just stop going up. Now, is that a winning political speech? Probably not. Be fun to discuss in like macroeconomics class. So that is but I think Harris is coming across as like maybe people think, hey, she doesn't get it. She doesn't realize how tough it is. Now, she is trying to do things like tax credits and lower taxes for working people. So hopefully that translates. But she's also at a tough spot because she's gonna have to potentially criticize her boss. The third thing that comes to mind is how immigration and the border. I agree with Phil that people should hold Trump accountable for blocking the it was more than bipartisan. It was like written by one Republican, an independent. I think Sinema is an independent, and a Democrat. So so he's right about that. On the other hand, I kind of think that Biden probably was so eager to be not Trump that he overcompensated and probably should have tamped down the volume of border crossings a lot earlier than he has. Now, Phil's right that the border crossings are lower now than they've been for many years. But the first 2 years of the Biden administration, I think they were pretty poor in terms of poor control. So here we are, faced with a choice. My thoughts are, at the end of the day, I don't trust Trump. I don't trust that he'll be honest, but I also don't trust that he'll make good choices. And I kind of trust Harris. As much as you can trust any politician. She'll want to be reelected. So she'll have that incentive, whereas Trump won't have to worry about reelection. So God knows what he might do. And then on the foreign policy thing, like, here's a scenario. Trump gets in, gives Netanyahu carte blanche. Netanyahu wants to stay in power, escalates a war with Iran. Because Trump walked away from the Iran nuclear deal, maybe Iran has nuclear weapons now, and then starts a nuclear war, which then we are forced to participate in, which then might bring in Russia or China. Like, how is this? That's not a good situation. That could be a Trump disaster scenario. Another Trump disaster scenario is he cuts all the taxes, blows a hole through the deficit, and then makes prices even higher with tariffs across the board. So then you're going to have high interest rates, high prices, and an even bigger deficit. That doesn't sound good. So yeah, overall, my feeling is, to me, this is not a hard call. You got to go with Harris. Hold on, the iRobot decided to vacuum right outside my door, so I'm gonna try and tell it to pause itself. Okay, thank you, iRobot. Let me finish off with the latest polls and betting odds so we can see how we're doing in key battleground states, whatever side you support, and who the gamblers think is going to win. But before I do that, I am going to give a shout out to the supporters of this channel who are channel members. And if you like this content and you want to see more of it, you want to keep this channel going, click the join link on YouTube, and you can join for as little as like $1.99 a month, and you get some recognition like what I'm about to do. You can also subscribe to my Substack, which is like an email newsletter. It's free, and I summarize all of my long live streams. So if you don't have time to listen to the whole live stream, you can get a summary and read it in like 2 or 3 minutes. But let's start off with our biggest supporter, who is Soldier One. He is a member of the Nerd Cabinet. Soldier One, been supporting the channel for over 4 years. Freaking awesome. Thank you, Soldier One. Then we have our members of Congress, Kristen Slevin, Bike, and Zig PC. Thank you to our congressional representatives. Then we have our city council. We've got Gene, David, DK, Jacalago, Mr. History, Mona, Vaughn, Yang, Dean, Galessa, Jay Perrin, Dana, Jason, Daniel, Jeremy, Mickey, Yoda, Jackson, Unkiyu. I wonder if was Jeremy? Was that the same Jeremy that was on our panel? Thank you, Jeremy, for being a member and being on our panel today. And then we have our registered nerds, and I'm going to scroll through these. These are listed in the order of time as members. So we've got some long time registered nerds, and you can be a registered nerd, get a little recognition like this, but more importantly, help keep this channel going. Part of the costs go to our podcast. So if you listen to podcasts, subscribe to Nerds for Humanity, and then go subscribe to the Substack, nerdsforhumanity.substack.com. It's free. Okay, so we're going to look at the polling, right? I promised you. All right, let's look at it together, because Donald Trump keeps telling his followers to look at only the Rasmussen polls. Unfortunately, Rasmussen is not considered the most reliable, but luckily, I'm going to show you multiple polls. So 538 takes an average of dozens of polls. So you're not subject to one poll being like way off or potentially biased. So let's see what that says for us here. You've got in national polls 48 to 45. I like to give Trump a 2 to 3 point booster because I think he doesn't poll as well as he actually produces on election day. So, which would suggest this is pretty much a toss up. So if you are a Trump supporter, like, pay attention here. Like, this is a very close race. So if your guy loses, it may not be because it was rigged. It might be because half the country didn't agree with you, and that happens. Let's look at the key states of Pennsylvania. Woo! 48-47. Doesn't get much closer than that. Michigan. 48.645. That's a little bit like, if you're Harris, you're feeling decent about Michigan. What about Wisconsin? 48-47. That's a little close. That's basically a coin flip. North Carolina, who has an interesting 47.5, 47.3. Jesus. Arizona, 47.5, 47. Jesus. Did we do Pennsylvania? Here's Pennsylvania. 48-46. 46A. This thing is going to be won by a hair. Whoever loses should concede because clearly it's close. Let's look at betting odds. Looking at gamblers' betting markets. Who did the gamblers think is most likely? They give it more to Harris, 53-45. And in the last week, you've got Harris up 1%, Trump down by 1.2 in the last day. You have Harris up by a fraction and pretty much no movement in the last day. But yeah, overall, whether you look at Polymarket, Betfair, Predicted, or Smarkets, it's around 51% to 53% for Harris, and then a high 40% chance, or 44% to 48% for Trump. All right, so we got a going away music, I forgot. And I'm going to give you my closing thoughts now. Okay, here we go. Ooh, that's a little bit too much closing music. All right, so what are the 3 takeaways from this conversation? The first thing is this is going to be a close race. The second thing is that the hardcore Trump supporters and hardcore Harris supporters are not changing their minds. They are locked in. I would love to find an independent out there who's undecided. I mean, how the hell can you be undecided at this point? I guess the only way you can be undecided is if you really don't like both of them. And I could understand that in the Trump-Biden race, the double haters, but is Harris really more hateable than Biden? I mean, Biden, I like the man. I just didn't think he was ready for another 4 years. So that's number one is like everyone's dug in. You've got the whole decision being made by a few undecideds in Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan. Crazy. Second takeaway is what we talked about earlier, whereas you can't even have a debate on key issues. Like in our panel, there were folks who thought it was a coup attempt, a attack on democracy, and then there were folks who said no, this was a largely peaceful gathering, no different than BLM protests. When I hear that, I'm like, wow, if we can't even agree on whether Jan 6 was a violent attack on a democratic process, we're screwed. And so, it's interesting. I think Drew in the beginning said, hey, let's not talk about Jan 6 because everybody's made up their mind on that one. And there's no way to change anybody's mind. So that's problematic. Same thing with the deficit. It's like, I don't believe your report. I don't trust your numbers. So that's a huge one. And then the third takeaway 1 is people are dug in. Takeaway 2 is where people disagree. They basically don't trust each other's sources. Let's put it that way. And then the third takeaway is how happy I think many of us will be when this election is over. Because if Trump loses, I would imagine his toxic tendencies will be in the rearview mirror. If Trump wins, oh man, then we'll have bigger issues than who's in power. I think our issues will be global peace and whether or not he funds a Netanyahu-led escalation in the Middle East, and then whether or not he sends us on a path where our national debt just reaches a breaking point. God, that sounds scary. Not to mention if he surrounds himself by like Don Jr. and Loomer and Rudy Giuliani, RFK. I was tempted to think about him when Biden was in, but I don't know. I'm not sure. So hopefully this panel was a discussion that you valued. I see 116 people in the live stream now. thank you for taking the time to tune in and hear a variety of perspectives. Whatever you do, please vote. Whoever you vote for, even if you vote for the orange guy, like, just vote, participate. And do me a solid and like, share, subscribe, and then comment below if you want me to do another one of these panel discussions. With that, I'm going to say good night. I'm about to go see Transformers with my family. I've heard good things about it. And hope you guys enjoy your weekend as well. Bye, nerds.